Howdy, welcome back to another episode of RC Rest-A-Mod. I decided to film the intro outside today because it was getting a little boring standing in front of my fireplace. All right, what we're going to do today is, first of all, we're going to talk about all the electronic parts that go in your RC car and how they work. And then we're going to go through checking a motor and a servo that were giving me some trouble. I'm not real happy with the way that all ended, but you're gonna get to see it anyway. And let's see, what else has we got on tap for today? I think that's about it. It's just all about electronics today. It's gonna be a little dry, but hopefully you get a chance to learn something if you don't already know. And if you do, go ahead and watch it anyway. Give me a like and maybe a subscribe because I could use it. I'm trying to get going here. Anyway, you guys have a great day and we'll get started right away. Put this little demonstration together to kind of make it where it's kind of demystify the electrical components that are in an RC car. Now, for your basic racer, basher, regular RC car, this is representative of the electronics that you'll have in it. Now, the first piece of electronics that you deal with is your controller. This one's a Fly Sky aftermarket one, but for the purposes of our discussion, it's the same as what came with your Slash or whatever that you might have. And what it does, when you pull the throttle or push the brake or turn the wheel, it takes those inputs and converts them to an electronic output that it can send through the air with radio waves. And this little doohickey right here is a receiver. It receives those electronic waves and converts them to a signal that goes either to the steering servo. We'll turn on the ESC. This is your steering servo, and what this does, when you turn the wheel and your transmitter tells the receiver the driver wants to turn the wheel, it turns a shaft that's tied to linkages on your car and makes the car turn. This deal over here is the ESC. You'll notice the battery is tied to the ESC because right through here is where all your big voltage is carried. There's another wire that goes out to the receiver and powers your steering servo and powers the receiver itself. But right here, it basically distributes the power to everything, and that's why it has the on-off button attached to it. And when you tell the controller you want to go, the motor turns. Go fast brakes. So that's basically how it works. This one converts what your inputs to an electronic signal sent through the air via radio waves caught by the receiver. And the receiver uses power that it's gotten from the ESC to either tell the front wheels to turn or tell the back wheels or all four wheels, if it's a four-wheel drive vehicle, what you want it to do. It's pretty much that simple. So that way, if you know your battery's charged well and you can turn, but it won't go when you pull the trigger, guess what? The ESC's good because the receiver's getting power and that's getting power, but the motor's not. Most likely, there are things that can go sideways and be confusing, but most of the time, if you've got power to everything else but not your motor, you've got a problem in the motor. If you're not getting power anywhere but your battery's charged well and the connections are good and the wires are good, you've got a problem in your ESC. If everything else is working but you can't turn, you got a problem in your servo, which is what we had on the little car we were messing with last night. It would go, stop, and do everything except the servo quit working. So we'll have to investigate that in just a moment. But that's pretty much it on how the electronics on your RC car work. It's not complicated. It can be very frustrating when something's not acting right. It can be very difficult to diagnose when things aren't doing the things that you think they should be doing. But it's pretty simple, so you can figure it out. Just stick with it. All right, now that you know how all the parts work, let's check the individual parts we have. In the initial assessment of the car we used for our backyard basher, we discovered that the steering servo was no good. And I did some testing off camera and found out that the VXL motor that I got in the haul is no good. The next two videos show me trying to see if that was something I could repair at home. And so we'll get that done real quick, and fingers crossed that we can fix them for nothing or for very little money. All right, guys, I was checking out the stuff I had from the haul that I showed in my first video, and I found out that my little brushless motor is locked up. So we're going to see if we can fix it. The first thing you do with one of these Traxxas brushless motors is peel the cover off the back, and you may need a small flat blade screwdriver to get that done. And then there's 4 screws that you need to pull out here. I pulled those out when it dawned on me, hey, this is good content that you're passing up on. So you pull off that cover and you find the bearing in the back. Well, and one thing you need to realize is that these bearings turn very, very fast. So when you inspect them, if they're not absolutely perfect, they need to be replaced. I can't feel any grittiness or drag or anything. I think this bearing is fine. That means that more than likely my problem is that bearing right under there. So let's get a look at it. You have to slide this out, and it does take quite a bit of pressure to get the rotor to come out of the center of it. Come on now. There we go. That has pretty strong magnets in it, and it's very dirty inside. We'll clean that up before we put it back together, if we find out the bearing's bad. All right, now we need to get that bearing out. I'm not sure if you can see down the barrel of it or not, but it's way up in there, and the easiest way to get it out is to come from this side and tap on it through the center there. So let's see if our screwdriver can do the job. We'll stick it on the bearing, miss the hole but hit the bearing. Well, we're going to have to get a little more serious than that. Let's go find a hammer. Okay, same procedure. There's a brick hearth behind me, and I'd rather strike against that than this little plastic table. So bear with me just a moment. All right, it is out, and it is completely locked up. Lucky for me, since I've been playing with RC cars for a while, I've got a pretty good stash of small bearings. Okay, the first thing we do when we come up with a bad bearing is measure it. And I highly recommend getting yourself a cheap set of calipers from, I think these came from Harbor Freight. Yes, they did. You can also get them off Amazon. Heck, Walmart may even have them. But a cheap set of digital calipers will save your sanity. Okay. That, when I squeeze it, I get 4.9, so that's 5 millimeter inside. And the outside is going to be 11. So I need a 5 by 11 bearing. We'll go into my stash of bearings for different things, from different cars. Yeah, I know, it's kind of ridiculous how many I've accumulated. And we'll start grabbing ones that look about right. That one looks pretty close. Let's check the size. 5 by 11. And let's check the thickness. There we go, we've got a new bearing. Now the easiest way, believe it or not, to get that bearing all the way down in there is to go ahead and install it here first. That feels smooth. Let's put the back bearing on it. Give her a little spin. Oh, that feels wonderful. Oh, now we need to give this a bit of a clean out before. Let's get this a bit of a clean before we put it back together. Okay. So now I've got some electronic cleaner and some paper towels. So I'll take and spray some of the cleaner up inside. I'll take that paper towel and put it over my pinky. If you've got smaller fingers than I, that might be handy to be able to get up in there a little bit better. Oh yeah, lots of black stuff coming out. And it's looking a bit shiny up in there. Much better. And it's kind of just dust. It's cleaning very easily. So now let's clean this part. Towel. Looks like it might have gotten a little bit rusty at some point, got some moisture up in it. That's what happens when you run these things hard. No harm, no foul. It should still run. But anytime you got a part off, you've got a good chance to clean it. And cleaning all the junk out of it will help it last longer. So take that opportunity each time it's given to you. Now the bearing's sitting down in the hole. Need something a little broader to give it a few whacks to make it go into the hole like I want. Bear with me, I'll find something. Will that fit down in there? That will. Okay. I think that's lined up. All right. That worked. Now the bearing is fully seated down in the bottom. Now we'll take the armature or the rotor or whatever it's called, drop that thing in. That's the bad bearing. So, there's a little spacer that goes here. And then the bearing. And there's this plate that has to line up so that the wires can pass through there and so that the bearing can press into the cup. Push all that together really well. Now we'll put these 4 screws back in. Two. Come on now. And the one we've been looking for since we started, the last of the 4. bit of a snug. It's another thing, when you're putting something together that has a whole bunch of screws in it, get them all started, kind of get them close to where they belong, but don't tighten them all the way until you get them all started. That'll save you a lot of heartache because it'll let things kind of move around. Now we've got that cover on. It does want to turn over by hand. So hopefully that's fixed. Now the motor, will it turn? Well, it did a second ago. And now it will not. There it goes. Now, that does turn, but it sounds awful. And we've got another little problem in that it gets hot. Just sitting here with the power turned on, it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. So no, it is not fixed. Okay, guys. Let's take apart this faulty servo. See if we can figure out what's going on inside it. You can peel off the top. There's a gasket, a whole bunch of gears with grease on it. And I'm really hoping that when I pry these gears, when I get these little gears out, I'm going to find at least one of them that's stripped out or locked up or something. Set that gasket off to one side. Okay, we got that one out. Why is that one stuck? Okay. Well, that little gear's not in great shape, or that little bearing there is not in great shape, but it still turns freely, as does that one. These teeth are tiny, but they're all still there. So it wasn't a gear tooth issue. Okay, so I've got a little demo board I put up, and we will use that to plug this servo in and see what we can see without the gears and the top part of the case being installed. Okay. Okay, now we've got our disassembled servo attached to our demo board. And it doesn't make any noise whatsoever. You know what that means? Unfortunately, that means it's junk. We're gonna have to get another one. Well, that went about like I feared. Looks like we need a servo and a VXL motor. Luckily, the car that we're going to be using for the oval track, they do allow you to swap the metal gears into the servo. And so I pulled the servo out of it, and it works great. It's gonna, it'll power our backyard basher or steer it. It's gonna be great. The VXL motor out of my Slash 4x4, that was my first car ever, has been stolen and will be put in there. And we'll attempt to get a Traxxas warranty on the motor that we got that was no good. Anyway, we got all the parts now. We're ready to put the thing together. If you think I'm an idiot for not already knowing all this stuff about electronics before I got started in RC, then let me know in the comments. Or if you learned a little something today and said, man, that was a lot of information in a small package, but I feel better, I would appreciate that comment, because that's what we're trying to do here. Anyway, you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next time on RC Restomod.